Okay, let's unpack this fascinating history. Think about this. While the modern nation of Bangladesh was founded, in 1971, the land it sits on has archaeological roots that go way, way back to the Stone Age.
Right. Or how a movement centered around language, something seemingly straightforward, actually became a core spark for independence.
Exactly. Those facts really set the stage, don't they? They highlight the incredibly deep, layered history we're looking at in the sources you've shared with us.
They really do.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to dive into your source materials on the history of Bangladesh. We're talking from those ancient origins right up to the challenges and, well, prospects of today.
And the plan is to pull out the most important insights, maybe some surprising facts, just to give you a really well-rounded understanding of how this nation came to be and where it stands now.
So let's start by going way back, like thousands of years. The sources reveal that the area we now call Bangladesh was first settled way back in the Stone Age.
Yeah, they found archaeological sites from the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Chalcolithic periods, places like Sonargaon, Valugacha, and especially Wari Bateshwar.
Okay, Wari Bateshwar. This is where it gets really interesting, according to these sources. It's not just ancient, it shows evidence of Chalcolithic periods stretching back to maybe 3500 BC, and an Iron Age phase from 1200 to 100 BC.
Right. And the insight seems to be that it wasn't just a settlement, it was part of a significant ancient kingdom, Virendra, possibly even the capital of an empire that ruled Bengal long, long ago.
And what stands out about Wari Bateshwar are the relics found there, right? Dating back 2,500 to 3,000 years, apparently linked to the Ganges civilization.
Exactly. We're talking terracotta seals, sculptures, copper coins from the 2nd century BCE. But get this, perhaps the most striking detail mentioned in the sources. Bricks found at the site are reported to be like 900 and 661 years old.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. And it's believed this location was part of an ancient trade route, connecting the Ganges Valley all the way to Eastern Asia. It really suggests a level of sophisticated organization and far-reaching connections incredibly early on.
Then there's Mahastangar, another major site highlighted. It was functioning as a key city-state between the 4th and 2nd centuries BCE and into the early 1st century CE.
And the findings there point to a real blend of religious influences, Buddhist, Hindu, Jain. And they show organized urban life, too, like a city wall built with bricks during Maharaja Udayatiya's reign.
The sources touch on other important sites, too, like Jamalganj, Baharpur, and the Somapura Burni temple complex built during the Pala dynasty.
Ah, yes, Somapura. What's fascinating there is the architecture. The sources describe it with a unique square shape, a high basement, bearing a surprising similarity to Khmer architecture you find in Southeast Asia.
That is interesting. And they also mention climate-controlled buildings and terracotta inscriptions in Devanagari script.
Yeah, which confirms that the Bengali language was developing and growing in importance even back then.
So this whole area became a kind of melting pot then. Through early migrations, starting around 700 BC, various communities arrived: Sumerians, Greeks, Persians, Scythians, Palestinians, Indo-Aryans.
And the sources indicate that this intermingling is really what gave rise to the distinct Bengali ethnicity. And interestingly, many of those Indo-Aryans embraced Mahayana Buddhism, which the sources say spread really rapidly through the region.
So Bengal emerged as quite a powerful region under various kings, many of whom converted to Buddhism.
That's what the sources suggest. There's even a mention of a King Danyakar Manik sending a golden bell as a present around the 3rd century BC. Just a small detail, but it hints at the region's prominence.
And it's amazing. The sources state that in the early 15th century, Bengal reportedly had 3,000 monasteries and 100,000 monks.
Yeah, 100,000. That isn't just a surprising number. It's an insight into the immense scale of Buddhist influence. It must have been a major spiritual and intellectual center.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources show Bengal's rivers were these, politically significant arteries under powerful empires like the Maurya and Gupta dynasties.
Right. But that prominence later shifted, apparently due to natural factors, the dense Sundarbans forest, changing river courses.
But trade and cultural exchanges still found other ways.
Exactly. So this ancient land wasn't static at all. It had these deep roots, but its fortunes were constantly shaped and reshaped by both people and geography long before modern states existed.
Okay, so moving forward in time, the sources say the Islamic era played a crucial role next, bringing a new form of political integrity, particularly under empires like the Taj and the Mughals.
And the start of this transition is presented in the sources through the decline of the local Sen dynasty and the arrival of Turkish Muslim conquerors. It's interesting, the sources differ slightly on the timing. Some say early 6th century, others specifically 1203.
But regardless of the exact date, the description in the sources is pretty stark, isn't it? A wanton and cruel attack bringing misery, leading to the death of Raja Lakshman Sen and the establishment of Muslim rule.
Yes, that's the language used.
Mhm.
And following this, particularly after 1203, the sources describe widespread Islamic conversion, especially among the lower castes.
And the insight offered there is that the faith's egalitarian approach was maybe seen as particularly attractive to those marginalized by the existing social structures.
That seems to be the implication, yes. This societal shift then contributed to the rise of local Muslim nobles. And by the late 14th century, Bengal had formed a provincial sultanate in the lower Ganges Delta, ruled by the Ilyas Shahi dynasty from Gaur.
And this is presented in the sources as the beginning of what they call native rule in Bengal, which interestingly adapted the existing Hindu administrative system instead of just replacing it.
Right, and under this sultanate, the sources detail a real flourishing of culture. Rulers patronized mystical poets, sages. Bengali literature saw a resurgence, written in local dialects alongside Persian.
So by the mid-15th century, under the Sharki dynasty, the sources say the Bengal Sultanate reached a kind of height of prosperity and culture.
But delving a bit deeper into the sources reveals it wasn't a simple story. It emerged from the chaos of the Delhi Sultanate after Ghiyas-ud-Din Tughlaq's death.
Okay, so there were internal power struggles, attempts to break free from Delhi.
Exactly. The sources highlight this assertion of a Sufi-styled Muslim rule, justified by religious invocation, specific proscriptions. It involved figures like theology doctors, reviving something called the Sunnat Council, basically using Islamic legal tradition to legitimize their authority.
So it was complex political maneuvering.
Very much so. They even mention acknowledging a figure called Babhan as Naib, like a deputy in local zemindars, landowners, denouncing Bengal's independence recognition. It shows this wasn't just a military takeover, it was intricate political maneuvering involving multiple power brokers.
Right, and if we connect that to the bigger picture, the sources then describe the subsequent Mughal rule, which solidified around the 16th century, as a shining jewel period.
Yeah, a time when art, architecture, poetry, music flourished. It attracted cultural historians. The fact that 3 important historical compendiums were written by participants at the time suggests a high level of courtly and intellectual activity. Sounds like a truly vibrant era.
However, the sources also offer a more turbulent view of the early Mughal advance into Bengal. They mention initial resistance, internal conflict among Bengali rulers.
Yes, they detail a figure named Kani Jani, described as a Bengali nobleman who consolidated power by, well, deliberately sowing discord among rivals like the Ottomans and Rajputs, using wanton destruction.
And the sources use a really powerful phrase here, stating he made Bengal a veritable hell on earth and a pawn in the international game.
That specific language really offers the insight that the transition to mobile control wasn't smooth. It was a period of intense conflict, devastation, highlighting the human cost of these power shifts.
And the sources state that this splendid period under the Mughals only declined, or was relegated to darkness, as they put it, after the arrival of the British.
Which brings us neatly, or perhaps not so neatly, to the colonial era. The sources tell us the British East India Company started in 1600 with a trade monopoly. But its purpose quickly shifted, didn't it?
It did. From simple commerce to systematically extracting raw materials from India for Britain's benefit, the sources are quite direct, stating the British took over Bengal, then India, through deception on one hand and physical violence on the other.
And a pivotal moment, clearly marked in the sources, is 1757. That's when the company gained the crucial right to collect taxes from Bengal.
And the sources explicitly call this the start of the British Empire in India.
Right. So what did this mean specifically for Bengal, according to the sources? They emphasize Bengal was targeted first precisely because of its immense wealth and agricultural resources.
And under British control, what the sources call a planned drain of backwardness began. Most of the wealth generated was sent back to England.
Which, the sources say, created this paradoxical situation of poverty with plenty, first in Bengal and then spreading across India.
They also describe the introduction of zamindari rule as fundamentally transforming Bengali society, ethics, morality.
Yes, concentrating wealth with the zamindars, the landowners. They're depicted as symbols of luxury, arrogance, oppression. Meanwhile, the peasantry were reduced to mere sharecroppers, easily evicted.
And the sources suggest this system, which maybe could have been benevolent, devolved into torment and oppression, generating vast wealth for the zamindars from the rural poor.
While the upper middle classes might have found some comfort, the sources contrast the zamindars' idle richness with the industrious nature of most Bengalis, who were just focused on necessities.
Okay, let's fast forward to the mid-20th century. The sources tell us when British India was partitioned in 1947, Bengal was tragically divided too, creating East Bengal, which became part of Pakistan.
And the sources attribute the deeper cause of this, well, seemingly arbitrary division to the British policy of divide and rule. Especially intensified, they say, after the 1857 revolt, as a deliberate strategy to introduce communalism and weaken potential Indian unity.
They explain that an earlier event, the British partition of Bengal in 1905, had already sown seeds of nationalism, but also, tragically, destroyed centuries-old amity and hospitality between Hindus and Muslims.
They state Muslims were incited against the Hindus, which the sources link to the rise of the Muslim League and its dream of an independent Muslim state.
However, the sources also present a more complex view here. They state the demand for partition can't be blamed solely on Jinnah.
Right. They suggest the idea had flourished throughout the administration under the British Raj much earlier. They even view a figure like Syed Ahmad as an agent of the British Raj.
So the insight here is that the sources paint partition as this culmination of long-standing policies, various influences, not just one leader's actions.
Exactly. Then, following World War II, negotiations led to the Cabinet Mission Plan in 1946. Sources note it was rejected by the Muslim League, but accepted by Congress.
And a striking detail from the sources. Just 1 week after Congress factions and the Awami League demanded power transfer, the Muslim League resolved to support partitioning Bengal.
A scheme, the sources explicitly state, the imperialists rejoiced at, using it as a pretext to partition India mainly along communal lines, described dramatically as clutching the throat of the great mass of the Indian people hard and fast.
So Pakistan is formed in 1947 based on the two-nation theory for South Asian Muslims. But the country is geographically split east and west wings with vastly different languages, cultures, heritage, despite sharing Islam.
And here's where it gets really problematic, according to the sources. In this new Pakistan, East Pakistan quickly felt like a colony within the federal structure.
The sources state Bengali-speaking Muslims were explicitly considered inferior to Urdu-speaking Muslims of West Pakistan.
And this wasn't just a feeling. It translated into stark inequality. East Pakistan never had more than, 23% representation in the civil administration?
No East Pakistani ever held one of the top 3 national offices. No provision for a separate legislative assembly for the East Wing, limited seats in the Constituent Assembly.
It led to governance described as dictation and draconian repression, including brutal bloodbaths, banning political parties, and severely distorted development.
The sources offer a powerful statistic. Only 1 out of 54 industrial units set up with foreign aid was actually in East Pakistan.
You can see how that created immense tension, resentment, really laying the groundwork for conflict.
And this is the essential backdrop for the language movement of the late 1940s and 1950s. The sources present this as a pivotal catalyst for nationalism against the West Pakistan regime.
The demand for official recognition of Bengali wasn't just about linguistics. It was a direct rejection of imposed Urdu, of West Pakistani culture. It fundamentally defined Bengali identity in a political sense.
After years of peaceful protests, the issue really came to a head in January 1952. Urdu was unilaterally declared the only state language for Pakistan,
which triggered widespread protests across East Pakistan. And what stands out in the sources about this period is the event of February 21st, 1952.
Right, the student demonstrators, marching peacefully towards the provincial assembly.
Were shot by police. The sources describe this as absolutely pivotal. It instantly transformed what was mainly a student protest into a mass movement, broadening support across society.
It brutally highlighted the state's willingness to use violence against peaceful demands and turned, in the sources' words, places of higher education into spaces to kill fellow citizens.
A chilling phrase. February 21st quickly became known as Language Day, a day of remembrance for the martyrs.
And the sources emphasize how this event inspired protests globally, built undeniable momentum for a broader socio-political agenda. The annual remembrance became a crucial ritual.
The sources make it clear its significance went far beyond language and institutions. It became ultimately about life and death.
This struggle for the Bengali language, Matribhasha, is described as a direct source of inspiration for the independence struggle. symbolizing dedication, courage, commitment to democracy.
And it achieved international recognition for Bangla, too. The martyrdom of figures like Rafiq, Jabbar, Shafir, Salam is central to this narrative.
The sources argue its significance isn't just for Bengal or the nation, but constitutes a heritage for the entire humankind, directly linked to International Mother Language Day.
So the language movement is framed as this critical start of organized resistance. The sources then take us to 1970. The Awami League, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, wins an overwhelming victory in the East Pakistan election, a clear mandate for autonomy, maybe even independence.
But the West Pakistani regime refused to transfer power. Instead, according to the sources, they planned to destroy the Awami League.
A plan that tragically culminated in the military crackdown starting March 25, 1971. The sources describe it as brutal, targeted, attacking civilians, Dhaka University's students, teachers, the public.
Leading to what the sources call savagely slaughtering unarmed citizens, thousands killed very quickly. Reports reached Kolkata early.
The sources also mention arrests of Awami League leaders, and quotes attributed to General Tika Khan saying he didn't want Bengalis left in Dhaka or East Bengal, a free hand order given to the army.
Just horrific. The Provisional Government of Bangladesh was formed that very night in response.
And the war for independence lasted 9 months. It evolved into this fierce guerrilla war involving the Mukti Bahini, the armed forces of the Provisional Government, and other groups.
The sources note self-defense units, like the Mukti Sena, formed immediately, setting the precedent for full-scale war by attacking the army. It's presented as an organized attempt at independence by the 70 million people of East Bengal.
Independence finally achieved on December 16, 1971.
If we connect this to the broader context, the sources describe India and Bangladesh initially as sister countries, though noting the symbolism was sometimes capricious.
Relations were relatively stable until what the sources call the premature departure of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, his assassination in 1975.
And after that, according to the sources, Bangladesh's foreign policy became influenced by communal understanding, saw aggressive alliances with Pakistan backed by other countries.
Yes, leading both India and Bangladesh to seek an upper hand in their relationship. That period up to 75 also saw multiple coups, military rule, a really turbulent phase.
The sources also mention the quest for international recognition post-independence was complicated. They have a striking line about a Red Army assertion of national sovereignty, overshadowing the indigenous struggle's success, framing the rulers in a diplomatically struggle against superpower politics.
Yeah, that Red Army reference is unusual in the context, as noted in the outline. It's presented as stated in the source material. They also note closeness to India was sometimes seen as hindering broader international support.
Right, and the sources also bring up earlier events as critical steps on that path to independence, like the 1954 election in East Pakistan, where the United Front won a landslide against the Muslim League, showing the shift in sentiment, but was quickly dismissed by the central government.
And the Agartala conspiracy case in 1968, where Sheikh Mujib and others were accused of treason, which further galvanized Bengali nationalism. These earlier events were definitely key milestones.
Okay, turning to more recent times. The sources describe the current political situation in Bangladesh as a deadly political crisis stemming from the controversy around the 2014 election and fundamental questions about government legitimacy.
That election is called highly flawed in the sources, citing issues like a boycott by major parties, voter manipulation, opposition exclusion, and the absence of a neutral caretaker system.
Which resulted in the ruling party winning an overwhelming 288 out of 300 seats, amidst significant allegations of intimidation and violence.
And this situation, according to the sources, triggered widespread protests, demands for a neutral caretaker government mechanism to ensure credible elections.
The sources highlight challenges for democracy, generally like lowered expectations among people, apathy, ruling parties viewing elections as mere show business.
Yeah, and they specifically delve into that caretaker government issue, the FNPT, as it's sometimes abbreviated in the sources. It started as a refuge, a good thing, in 1991 to ensure fair elections.
But later became problematic, described even as a curse.
Right. And its abrupt abolition in 2011, the sources argue, left Bangladesh without this crucial safeguard, leading to what they call a wholly predatory regime having unlimited powers to control the electoral process.
The protests that followed aimed for a credible election, but a shadow government identified in the sources as the 14-party alliance linked to the ruling party is described as having destroyed the electoral process.
The sources also note international donors didn't really support calls for judicial recourse on this, and the ruling party claims sole credit for handling the crisis. The insight seems to be that the breakdown of specific political institutions, like that caretaker system, is viewed in the sources as central to the current democratic crisis.
Yet, despite these really profound political challenges, the sources also note that Bangladesh has actually done remarkably well at economic development, especially after a difficult start.
Yeah, the economy's grown at an impressive average of about 6% over the last 2 decades, and social indicators have shown significant improvements.
We're talking things like average school years, mortality rates, life expectancy, nutrition, contraception use.
Right. And the sources do mention the political situation saw some improvement in the early 2000s. They also highlight specific large infrastructure projects undertaken after the country achieved MDGs plus status in 2010, meaning it surpassed many Millennium Development Goals, calling them monuments of human creativity.
Okay, shifting gears a bit to economy, society, culture. The sources describe Bangladesh as having this rich, agro-based economy before and after independence. Clearly potential there, but also inherent challenges.
Huge challenges. Incredibly high population density, limited resources, erratic climate, natural calamities, and, the lingering legacy of past exploitation.
What's fascinating here is the speed of the structural transition described in the sources. It happened incredibly rapidly, largely within about 41 years post-independence.
Yeah, the economy shifted fundamentally from primarily agriculture-based to one where more than half of the GDP now comes from the service sector.
And the garments industry is particularly highlighted, isn't it? The single largest contributor to the industrial sector.
Absolutely. Started small in the mid-'70s, exploded in growth, now ranks second globally in garments export, accounts for around 80% of total exports, maybe 18% of GDP, employs roughly 4 million people.
The sources call it the premier industry, but also a cautionary note that its dominance risks jeopardizing many other promising industries.
Despite global challenges, its growth has been remarkable. It signals an economy becoming much more complex, more globally integrated.
On the social front, developments have shown significant improvements, especially in health and education. The sources hope these will continue to positively impact economic growth.
Yeah, maternal and child health indicators improved significantly, linked in the sources to a comprehensive safety net and maternal health care programs. Primary school enrollment also increased substantially.
However, challenges definitely remain. The sources are clear about this. Maternal deaths still high. They fight 315 per live birth, highest in South Asia after one unspecified country.
And most women still deliver at home, without skilled birth attendants. While gender equality in education has improved overall, inequality persists significantly in high-poverty rural areas.
The sources state many districts are no better off educationally now than in 1991. That's quite stark.
It is. They also mention prevalence is high, though don't specify of what, and supply demand for certain health interventions are weak. Plus, a gender-biased curriculum in secondary education is cited as actively contributing to ongoing inequality.
Okay, moving beyond economics and politics. The sources paint a really vibrant picture of Bangladesh's cultural heritage, calling it among the richest in the world, nourished by renowned poets, dramatists, writers.
Literature and the arts are presented as absolutely central. The sources highlight poets like Qazi Nazrul Islam, the rebel poet Joshimuddin, and of course Rabindranath Tagore, first Asian Nobel laureate in literature back in 1913.
And musical genres like Rabindra Sangeet, Nazrul Giti are deeply ingrained. Folk traditions, theater, traditional songs still performed widely, enduring through all the upheaval.
The festivals and traditions sound incredibly colorful and rich, reflecting diversity, the cycle of life tied to agriculture.
Pohela Baishakh, the Bengali New Year on April 14th, is a major national event, welcoming the year with pomp and grandeur. Nibbana, the harvest festival.
And the sources mention a unique observance called Puthbashan, book unveiling, involving holy scriptures, decorated platforms, traditional activities often in palaces, highlights a reverence for text and tradition.
Bangladesh is called the land of fairs in the sources. That really captures a sense of community life, doesn't it?
It does. Neighborhood, temple, community, trade, book fairs presented as part of daily life, integrating rural people. Religious and seasonal festivals amplify the culture.
And Pohela Boishakh includes the Mongol Shobhajatra procession, symbolizing a new start for culture and life, seen as a vibrant practice, not just superficial.
Right. And traditional foods like Panta Bhat and Panta Ilish are customs enjoyed on this day, welcomed by everyone, regardless of background.
The sources also mention the land being a place of education since ancient times, Mahastangar as an early site.
But they note, in later periods, the non-recognition of Bengali in formal settings deprived many of education, which led to new schools and colleges focused on the mother tongue.
And the sources state, quite starkly, that the Muslim class in Bengal was totally uneducated for centuries for various historical reasons, highlighting that complex interplay of language, religion, access to knowledge.
Yeah, it's complex. Looking at Bangladesh globally, the latter half of the 20th century saw its transition from part of Pakistan to a least developed country. But in the 21st century, the sources consistently present it as a success story in poverty alleviation income, education improvements.
The narrative shifted dramatically, they say, from famine and oppression to what the sources describe as a vibrant portrait of an Afro-Asian growth pole, the Boston of Asia.
Quite a turnaround. Yet concerns persist, particularly economic vulnerabilities, dependence on apparel, microcredit issues, external dependency, potential problems from elite collusion.
And a fundamental question raised in the sources is whether Bangladesh can truly shake off its colonial past, build a sovereign welfare state, or risk remaining dependent within the world capitalist system.
Right, and connecting this to national identity, the sources discuss the challenge of forming a coherent identity, achieving national unity. They bring up this idea of elite-driven nation-state formation,
suggesting the interests of one segment maybe determine the utopia for all, potentially viewing the poor majority as expendable.
That's the implication discussed. The sources note that despite progress, arguments about persistent poverty and grievances continue, suggesting a need for intervention from above.
Okay, internationally. The sources point to changes in global power structures, Bangladesh's strategic shift away from heavy dependency on foreign powers.
And they highlight its location as a significant crossroads between South Asia and Southeast Asia, connecting India, China, Myanmar with Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore.
That location offers clear geopolitical advantages. Its long border, the corridor linked to India's northeastern states.
Good relations with India, especially since 2008, are seen in the sources as helping India develop trade, connectivity, energy corridors through Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Which also strengthens India's security position regarding China's influence.
But the sources also mention plans for connectivity through Myanmar to southern China, potentially offering China alternative trade routes, reducing dependence on the Strait of Malacca.
Exactly.
And transnational highways plan to strengthen ties with India, Myanmar, Thailand, offering routes for Bangladeshi goods to the Mekong subregion.
However, the sources impartially note this may also reduce Calcutta Port's importance,
Yeah.
potentially impacting India's economy. And China seeking alternatives could undermine India's influence. It's a complex geopolitical game.
Very complex, with Bangladesh right in the middle. But despite the economic and social achievements, Bangladesh faces the significant list of challenges according to the sources. It's a long list. Poor law and order, violence, terrorism, child abuse, political instability, corruption, environmental degradation, poverty and unemployment, food insecurity, infrastructure shortages, energy crisis, lack of accountability, governance rule of law issues, declining education quality.
Yeah, multifaceted difficulties. The sources describe law and order as having sharply deteriorated widespread violence, crime, harassment. An increase in student crimes noted too.
And specific data on press freedom issues, citing Bangladesh with the worst record in Asia for attacking journalists, one of the deadliest countries for them in 2011-2012, ranked 102-179 by Reporters Without Borders.
That's deeply concerning. Fundamentalism and terrorism are also noted as rising challenges, despite state efforts. The sources give chilling specific examples.
Like the coordinated bomb blasts on Valentine's Day 2005, 80 bombs in 63 districts, reports of violence targeting ethnic groups, foreign tourists, 6 blasts in Cox's Bazar tourist centers, assassinations of political figures like Kibriya, Bulbul, bombings of religious educational sites.
And they mention armed groups linked to political parties, especially the ruling party, attacking towns, damaging infrastructure. Violence tied to what the sources call clientelism, that system where political power is exchanged for favors, often fueling conflict and impunity.
Political instability is called a harsh reality, a paradox where people want democracy, but the country struggles for stable governance.
The sources state the prevailing parliamentary arrangement, after a bitter initial experience, evolved into repressive regime governance. Executive power described as blatantly arbitrary, reckless, and questionable. The judiciary subjected to relentless derision.
Allegations of excesses, insecurity for the opposition, undue influence on the judiciary mentioned regarding the 2001-2006 ruling party. And the courses state the subsequent ruling party had to pass over ruling in the style prevailed then, highlighting a disturbing cycle.
Yeah, a cycle. And environmental degradation is identified as a colossal challenge, making Bangladesh a climate change victim due to its geography: flooding, sea level rise, salinity.
The rivers around Dhaka face immense waste discharge, endangered by unchecked urbanization, illegal development, bank grabbing, waste dumping, sand lifting, barriers.
The sources even state several major rivers in Bangladesh are among the most endangered globally.
So what does this all mean for the future, looking at these sources? They discuss a kind of political identity crisis. Is it parliamentary, one party, oligarchic, autocracy? Its turbulent history resists simple labels.
Indices, according to the sources, point towards a competitive autocracy, characterized by a poorly functioning government going through electoral processes that, well, lack genuine contestation, according to this material.
And the sources argue the core crisis is structural. The lack of a reliable political refuge or safeguard when the ruling party becomes what they describe as a predatory oligarchy.
Essentially, a ruling group exploiting the state for its own benefit while scorning institutions of democracy.
Okay, so to bring this deep dive to a close, we've journeyed through this incredibly long history, starting with those ancient Stone Age roots, sophisticated early settlements.
We've traced the rise and fall of empires, examined the profound impact of colonial rule, and seen how the crucial language movement forged a distinct Bengali identity and ignited the path to independence.
We covered the fight for independence itself, pivotal moments like the 1954 election, the Agratala conspiracy case, the brutal 71 crackdown, and tragically Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's assassination, which the sources describe as the culmination of the counter-revolution directed at reversing the special character of the Liberation War, stating post-75 regimes had to justify their illegitimacy.
And we've looked at the complex realities since 1971, grappling with all those political, economic, social, environmental challenges, yet also achieving remarkable economic growth, building that powerful garment industry, making significant strides in social indicators.
All while sustaining an incredibly rich and resilient cultural heritage through literature, arts, festivals, traditions.
Bangladesh has truly transformed, from a state born out of immense struggle into a complex, rapidly changing nation with a unique identity forged through centuries of history and facing ongoing, profound challenges.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought, drawn straight from your sources. They note that while Bangladesh has undeniably been a success story in certain key areas, it still grapples with deep structural vulnerabilities and a turbulent political landscape that the sources starkly describe as a predatory oligarchy.
So the question becomes, can a nation with such ancient cultural roots, a clear history of resisting oppression, and that recent impressive economic dynamism truly overcome these fundamental political and environmental challenges? Can it build a genuinely sovereign, just, and stable society for all its people?
That's definitely something worth continuing to consider.